The night I found the locked room at the end of the upstairs hallway, I finally understood why the Whitmores picked me out of 40 kids at that orphanage, and it had nothing to do with love. But to understand what was behind that door, you have to understand how a nobody like me ended up in a mansion in the first place. It started 6 months ago, on the worst day of my life, which is a strange thing to call the day someone finally chooses you. I was 16, and I'd been at St. Augustine's for 12 years, since I was 4, long enough to learn the one rule that mattered. The cute babies get adopted, and the rest of us get good at not hoping. To the staff, I wasn't even Mia. I was Bed 19, the girl who'd been passed over so many times, they'd stopped getting their hopes up for me too. So when the matron told me a family wanted to meet me, not a baby, me, I almost didn't go down. I'd sat in that meeting room before. I'd watched couples smile politely at me, then leave holding a toddler's hand instead of mine. I figured this was just one more chance to get my heart broken. It wasn't. It was something much worse. I just didn't know that yet. They were called the Whitmores, Richard and Eleanor. The kind of rich where their car cost more than the entire orphanage building. Eleanor knelt down right there on the cracked linoleum in a coat that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned, and she took my hands like they were something precious. And she said, and I'll never forget this, "We've been looking for you for a very long time." I should have asked what she meant. Looking for me? They'd never even met me. But I was 16 and starving for someone to want me, so I didn't ask a single question. I just cried. And 2 weeks later, I had a new last name, a new house, and a whole new life. The first month was a fairy tale. My own bedroom, bigger than the dorm I'd shared with 11 other girls. A closet so big, I didn't have enough clothes to fill a corner of it. Eleanor took me shopping and called me sweetheart and told me to pick anything I wanted. Richard taught me chess on Sunday afternoons, and the first time I actually beat him, he laughed so hard he nearly knocked the whole board over. For a few weeks, I let myself believe it. I let myself think, maybe this is what normal feels like. Maybe it's finally my turn. But I kept waiting for the catch. 12 years in a place like St. Augustine's teaches you one thing for certain. There's always a catch. It showed up slowly. Little things at first. The way Eleanor would be mid-sentence, laughing, and then go completely still, staring at me like she was looking straight through me at someone standing just behind my shoulder. The way Richard actually flinched the first time I laughed out loud at dinner, like the sound of it had reached into some old wound. And once, Eleanor called me by a different name, just for half a second. She caught herself, laughed it off, said she was tired. But I heard it. It started with an S. Then I noticed the photographs. The house was full of them. Richard and Eleanor at galas, on beaches, in front of grand fireplaces. But there was a gap on the staircase wall, one frame taken down. You could still see the faint rectangle where it had hung for years, the paint inside it a slightly cleaner shade than the wall around it. Like they'd pulled one specific picture down in a hurry, right before I arrived. I told myself I was being paranoid. Orphanage kids are experts at finding problems where there aren't any. It's a survival skill. But 3 nights later, I woke to voices coming up through my bedroom floor. Eleanor and Richard arguing in the study below me. And then, clear as anything, I heard my own name. I crept out onto the landing, heart slamming, and pressed myself against the banister. Eleanor was crying, those quiet, hollowed-out sobs of someone who's been crying for years. And Richard said the sentence that split the whole fairy tale right down the middle. "She looks exactly like Sarah. I can't keep doing this, Eleanor. Every time I look at her, I see our daughter. And then I have to remember she's gone, all over again." Their daughter. They had a daughter. And in 6 weeks, in that entire house full of photographs, nobody had said her name to me, not once. After that night, I couldn't stop noticing, especially the room. The locked room at the very end of the upstairs hallway, the one door in the whole house that was always shut. When I'd asked about it, Eleanor's smile had gone tight, and she'd said it was just storage. But twice now, I'd watched her slip in there late at night and come out an hour later with red, swollen eyes. Nobody cries like that over storage. So one gray afternoon, when they'd both gone into the city, I found the spare key in the back of Richard's desk drawer, hidden under a stack of old letters. My hands shook so badly I could barely fit it into the lock. And some part of me already knew. Once I opened this door, I could never unknow whatever was waiting on the other side. The room was a bedroom. A girl's bedroom, frozen perfectly in time. Soft pink walls, fairy lights long gone dark, a bed neatly made that clearly hadn't been slept in for years. And on every single surface, the desk, the shelves, the nightstand, photographs of a girl who could have been my twin. The same dark hair, the same hazel eyes, the same slightly crooked smile I see in the mirror every morning. Sarah. I drifted through it like I was dreaming, picking up frame after frame. And then I saw it, on the windowsill, half hidden behind the curtain, a small white urn. And that's when I finally understood. Sarah wasn't away at college. Sarah wasn't ever coming back. Sarah was gone. And the Whitmores hadn't gone looking for a daughter at all. They'd gone looking for a face. They'd found a girl who looked like the one they lost, and they'd tried to fill that hole with me. I sank down onto the edge of Sarah's bed, holding her photo, and I didn't even hear them come home. I don't know how long Eleanor stood in the doorway. When I finally looked up, I braced for her to scream, to tell me I had no right, that I'd trampled on something sacred. Instead, she crossed the room slowly, sat down on the bed beside me, and looked at the photo in my hands. And she said the saddest thing I have ever heard anyone say. When the agency sent me your file and I saw your picture, I thought God had given her back to me. Her voice broke completely. I'm so sorry, Mia. I'm so sorry. And right there, I had a choice to make. I could be furious. I had every right to be. They hadn't brought me into their home because they saw me. They'd brought me in because I reminded them of someone they couldn't let go of. That is a cruel thing to do to a kid who has never, not once in her whole life, been chosen for herself. But sitting there beside her, watching this woman come apart over a photograph, I saw something else too. Two people so wrecked by grief that they'd done something desperate and broken. Not because they were monsters, but because they had no idea how to survive losing her. And maybe, clumsily, for all the wrong reasons, they'd actually been trying to learn how to love again. So I wiped my face, and I asked her the only question that mattered. I don't want to be Sarah, I whispered. I can't be her. I'll never be her. So I need to know, can you love me? For me? Not because I look like her. Eleanor pressed her hand over her mouth, and then she pulled me into her arms and held on like she was afraid I'd disappear. And the two of us cried until the room went dark, and neither of us got up to turn on the lights. It wasn't a movie. There was no magic hug that fixed everything overnight. The next few weeks were hard. Richard could barely look at me. Every time I walked into a room, he'd find some quiet excuse to leave it. One night, I heard him crying behind the door of Sarah's room, and I almost packed my bag right then. I told myself this had all been a mistake, that I should leave before they broke my heart worse than it had ever been broken before. But then, one Sunday morning, I came downstairs and Richard had set up the chessboard. He didn't say a word. He just pulled out the chair across from him and waited until I sat down. We played in complete silence for almost an hour. And right at the very end, without lifting his eyes from the board, he said, very quietly, Sarah hated chess, said it was boring. A long pause. I'm glad you don't. It was the first time he'd said her name to me without it sounding like a wound. And it was the first time he looked across that table and actually saw me. Not the ghost of someone else, but me. That was the beginning, not a replacement, something new and entirely our own. A few months later, the three of us took Sarah's photo out of the locked room together. We stopped hiding it away. We stopped pretending she'd never existed. We hung it back on the staircase wall, right in that gap I noticed on my very first week. And next to it, Eleanor hung a brand new frame, a photo of me. Two girls, side by side on the wall. One they had lost, and one they had finally, truly found. Because you don't move forward by pretending the past didn't happen. You move forward by letting it sit beside you and choosing to keep living anyway. And that's how a girl who used to be called Bed 19, the girl nobody ever picked, finally got a family and a name worth keeping.